Right, let's take this further. We're joined in studio by Allan Kolski Horwitz from the South African Jews for a Free Palestine. Thank you for joining us. What's your response to what Julius Malema was saying today?
Well, I think Mr. Malema was spot on. The Israeli political establishment has sabotaged every effort to negotiate some sort of solution which takes into account the rights of Palestinians, yet at the same time safeguards the fact that there are 7 million Israeli Jews in what was historic Palestine. The Oslo process, as defective as it was in many ways, was a beginning to a true reconciliation between a settler community, a Jewish population that had not been there until, let's say, the last 50 years in numbers, and the indigenous Palestinian people. I think where Mr. Malema really put his finger on it was that BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions, is really the only weapon that the Palestinians have today in order to force genuine negotiations. The Israeli government is intent on slowly annexing what is left of Palestine. The 22%, which is still safeguarded under theoretically a Palestinian authority in West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem, is being eaten up, so to speak, by Jewish settlers. That, of course, is a serious warning bell.
So we'll go at one stage we had a situation where Jewish people had no homeland. You will have Palestinian people with no territory to call their own. Precisely.
Now, my organization that I represent is not opposed to necessarily the existence of Israel. The Jewish state has been recognized by the world. On that, perhaps Mr. Malema is overreaching himself. But the fact is that Israel today is an apartheid state. Palestinian Israelis do not have equal rights. They're discriminated against. There's effective job reservation and, if you like, group areas. There's less money spent on a Palestinian Israeli child in education terms than an Israeli child. So within Israel itself, there is severe discrimination. And on the West Bank, of course, we still have an effective occupation. Gaza is under siege in the most miserable conditions. The Israeli political establishment has veered to the extreme right. In fact, Israel is one of the few countries in the world that gives Donald Trump not just endorsement, but fully backs him and pushes him to take even more extreme steps in the context of the Middle East.
Have things changed since Donald Trump became president of the United States? Seemingly that the whole attitude of the West towards Jewish settlements?
Well, you know, the West has paid lip service to the fact that these settlements are illegal, which in fact they are under international law. But as we've seen with FIFA recently, where the World Federation of Soccer endorses the fact that Israeli teams from the occupied West Bank can play with Israeli teams within so-called Green Line Israel, shows you that Europe, United States, and the powers that control world soccer are actually backing the Israeli establishment. So we don't have a real shift within the world beyond rhetorical recognition of Palestinian rights. Effectively, we need the BDS campaign to be far more rigorously enforced so that Israelis truly understand that what they are doing is not just immoral, but it's a slow form of genocide. To extinguish
entirely. Would you go that far?
The definition of genocide is not simply physical extermination, which the Jewish people certainly have experienced, but it's also the extinguishing of a national, if you like, entity, a national society. And that is certainly what is happening with Palestine, both in territorial terms, cultural terms, economic terms.
What would you like? What is the solution? Julius Malema talking about one state, presumably where people have equal political participation. Do you believe in the two-state solution so everybody has adequate land?
Well, we don't, as it were, have a position, one state or two states, in that it's not for us as outsiders to take a decision or to recommend.
You want the negotiations to happen?
A majority of Palestinians support a Palestinian state. A majority of Israeli Jews support an Israeli state. The key question is human rights across the board, so that there's no discrimination to citizens of either state that are not of the, let's say, the majority community. Of course, the power balance at the moment so favors the Israelis that when we speak of an Israeli state and endorse it, we are endorsing an apartheid regime. So there has to be a process within Israel where it comes to terms with the fact that it is a Middle Eastern power, a Middle Eastern society, and should not be playing the power game with the United States or with the Russians in terms of carving out a position for Jews which is beyond what could be considered reasonable.
We're running out of time. Finally, the land issue, Israel, is an emotional issue for Jews, a religious issue. Are you supported by members of your own community? And do you think that South Africans in this big global or geopolitical issue could actually have a voice?
Well, unfortunately, the South African Jewish community is very, very supportive of the Zionist position, the extreme right wing of the Zionist position. In the United States, funnily enough, young Jewish people are starting to question what Israel is doing on a scale that's never been seen before. That is very encouraging. In South Africa, the Jewish community was not very active in the anti-apartheid movement. And now with Israel too, it's showing a very right-wing, conservative, nationalist perspective. So the group that I represent does only represent a minority view, but we believe a very important one, and one which is actually in line with the prophetic Jewish position, which is a universalistic position, not narrow chauvinist nationalism. That is our issue. The South African Jewish community acts as if it's still an outpost of European or white privilege, and that must change.
All right, thank you for your strong views tonight. That was Allan Kolski Horwitz from South African Jews for a Free Palestinian State.